Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Botany Bistro. My name's Mary Dudley, and I'm the Ecology Education Manager at the Civic Garden Center. We're located in Cincinnati, Ohio, so if you're local, we definitely encourage you to come out. We have so many beautiful flowers blooming in the garden, and the magnolias are just amazing. I love this time of year. We usually get a cold snap, and so lots of our magnolias are going to lose their flowers when that happens, but we've held on to them this season for a little bit longer than we usually do. And so if you want to come and walk our grounds, we have lots of different varieties, and our red bud behind me, as you can see, is starting to bloom as well. And so as we have been together through all of these different seasons, this is our 22nd episode of the Botany Bistro. I've had so much fun preparing these to share with you, and the idea for these sessions are really to give you some bite-sized botany that you can use in your own life. I have a botany degree that I earned from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and that knowledge that I learned has really built so much foundation for me to rely on as I garden, as I consult, as I troubleshoot. And so I'm always learning something new about plants. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me to get reconnected to some of those scientific avenues and also renew some relationships. Today we're going to have a wonderful guest on, and we're going to be talking about agronomy. But before we do that, let me just recap some of the other topics that we have covered so far. We started off our series with some basics. We talked about systematics and taxonomy. We've talked a little bit about breeding and genetics, plant morphology, plant anatomy, plant physiology. The list goes on. Most recently, we were talking about paleobotany, ethnobotany, and we did have a part 1 to agronomy that we previously posted. So if you missed that session and you want to catch up, definitely check out our YouTube channel. We also have those archived on our website at civicgardencenter.org. And so this topic that we're discussing is relevant to everyone who eats. If you feel like you aren't sure about our food system or how you can get involved, we really recommend that you get in touch with us so that we can support you no matter where you are on the globe. There are so many different ways to get hooked in. We've been around since 1942, so about 80 years, and we started when people were starting to garden during the Victory Garden movement, and they needed that information for their own sustainable lives and growing and health. They wanted to have that local food that they could access. Times really haven't changed all that much. We're still discovering new ways to grow healthy food and trying to increase that access for everyone who needs it. That we're empowering people with the knowledge that they need so that they can really take control of their own health and be part of our food system. So that's what we're going to be learning about today, is agriculture and how those pieces all mix together. And so without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce to you Mr. Tom Menke. Tom is a professional agronomist. I will let you know very transparently that that is not my area of expertise. While I love researching and I love sharing information with others, I do recognize that my personal and professional experience has not brought me to all of these different disciplines. And so I am very grateful to him for coming on with us today so that we can hear from that professional perspective and really get a handle on what this field is all about. I'm also encouraging young people and career changers of any age to really consider, being part of this opportunity. This is a widely, quickly growing field. No pun intended, or pun intended, for sure. And so if you're interested in taking more classes, studying professionally, getting that professional development under your belt so that you can pursue some of these things we're talking about today, please know that there is a space for you. And we would love your creativity and your curiosity as we move forward into this field, because really it's going to take a lot of us working together in order to make a sustainable food system going forward. So Mr. Menke actually got his degree right here in Cincinnati. And while he's not here in the same room with me, he has joined us virtually. He's been working in the field of agronomy for almost 50 years, and he was recommended to us by a really good friend, Jim Beakey. And so I just want to say thank you to Jim for recommending Tom to us today, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here or there virtually. I'm Tom Minke. I live up in Darke County, which is western Ohio, about 90 miles north of Cincinnati. Went, as Mary said, to the University of Cincinnati, and my degree was in biology, but my emphasis at school was plant ecology. And somehow that gave me a good basic understanding of how plants grow. And being from the agricultural community that I'm from, it helped me understand agronomy very well, at least I think well enough to serve as a career that I enjoyed over time. So look forward to telling you a little bit about what an agronomist does and get a little deeper in some of the things that I think are important to understand about that profession. Okay, so I thought I would entitle this, Who Needs an Agronomist? And then I'll explain a little more about why I'm asking that question. One of the things that perhaps got me started, my grandfather was a teacher and also had a farm where he raised poultry and had an orchard and raised flowers and had acres of tulips. And now, he died long before I was born, but I did end up with some of his books, and one of them was called Farm Knowledge. This was printed in 1918 by the Sears Roebuck and Company. You can see on the cover, you've got a man in a car who's going out to the farm to evidently give some advice. So that's kind of the career I chose, is giving advice on going out to the farm and sitting down with the kitchen table with everybody and helping them plan ahead. The other thing in this profession I've enjoyed over the years is I enjoy working with people who work with the land. Now, this is a picture right out of that book, which I thought was so cool, to talk about the three independent things that farmers stand for, which is industry, independence, and patience. And any of you who have done gardening, even on a small scale, it takes work, it takes patience. It says wait and accept gracefully whatever nature has to offer, because then we realize there's so many things that are out of our control. And what we try and do is control those things that we can. So what is, or who is an agronomist? You got your notepads. An agronomist needs to understand the factors that grow healthy and productive plants. We're all about growing plants, whether it's in the garden or a commercial operation. I've had the privilege over the years, some of my first clients were in Cincinnati, that I worked with greenhouses that grew tomatoes and lettuce and cucumbers. And some of those farms, well, those glass farms, some were an acre, some were up to 3 acres in size, which is huge. And that was a great experience and fun to do in the wintertime, to go in and see 3 acres of lettuce growing in the middle of January. An agronomist knows how to collaborate with others to give sound advice to the grower. And what that means is you don't know everything. There's a lot of other people that you may have to consult with to get the information you need to help people. Top of the list, an agronomist needs good communication skills, so he can give clear advice to achieve the goals of the grower. If you can't communicate what you know in a fashion that they can understand, then you're not worth much. You need to be a troubleshooter. Mary, I heard you talking about troubleshooting, and that's very important that you get out in the field, because there's always going to be a problem. No matter how perfect you think things are set up, there's going to be a bug or a weed or a disease or something. And you have to know how to go out there and say to the grower that you're working with, not that, well, I know the answer, but I'll get the answer for you. We'll figure this out together. And then the agronomist needs to understand the economics of the production and the resources available to the grower. You may have the same information for a grower or a farmer who is growing the same crop, but their economic situation or the resources they have available to them otherwise may be completely different. So you might end up making different recommendations based off the same information. But basically, you're a specialist in growing plants, and you need to have the knowledge of insects, good ones and bad ones, undesirable plants, i.e. weeds. My grandma used to say, a weed is just a plant that's not in the place where you want it to grow. Soil pests, there's pests underground such as nematodes. Plant diseases, some are obvious above ground, some might be root diseases below ground. Soil structure and water, we'll talk a lot about soil structure. Soil fertility, nutrients that grow those plants that they need to feed on. And how to manage all these things. It sounds like a lot, but again, you need to be kind of the generalist, but know what some of these things are and how to get the resources to pinpoint how to manage these. And foremost, the agronomist helps manage the soil. And the soil, it's at the heart of everything. It's a complex, wonderful system that impacts the external environment as well. Part of my specialty in my career has been not only a consulting agronomist, but one whose focus is on water quality impacts of what we do to the land. Because essentially about everything that we do as humans, whether it's tilling the soil, disposing of things such as biosolids, what we used to call sewage sludge, animal manures, all those things go back to the soil, and the soil processes them and actually turns those things into beneficial things to grow more plants. But if we don't do things in the proper way, in a proper balance, it can impact water quality, which in a negative way or a positive way, depending if we're managing things correctly. So this fundamental basics of the soil, there's three components of a soil. I know most people just look at it as dirt, but there's a physical, chemical, and biological component of each soil. Those things all work together. A normal soil, a good soil, 25% of it's air. If it has no air in it, then it won't grow plants because they need air, and the organisms live in there need air. Water, any of you that have done any gardening are familiar, if you don't water, or even your house plant, it wilts and dies. So the soil is typically about 25% water, and then 45% mineral. That may be clay, sand, other types of minerals. And that last 5% is extremely important. That's the organic matter in the soil. And that organic matter itself is made out of humus, which is partially decomposed organic matter. It's roots, and it's organism. And that 10% organisms is just a myriad of billions of type of organisms in every cup of soil. So we need to understand that those are all important parts of the soil. And I'll keep hammering on organic matter. Now, I'm not talking about organic farming, even though good organic matter is a basis for good organic farming. But the organic material, the plant residues that you till from your garden or that you make in your compost, all those things help make a stable soil particle size, helps water infiltration, helps the water holding capacity of the soil, and keeps the bulk density of the soil down. So if you have a soil that's very compact, you pour water on it, water runs off, soil organisms, roots don't grow well. And I think many of you who have done gardening or even house plants or larger farms, you kind of instinctively know a good soil when you see it. It's usually a darker color, it feels friable, it has a earthy smell to it. That's a good soil. Organic matter helps make a good soil. Then there's the biological properties of a soil. When you look below the surface, there's a whole lot of stuff going on down there. I mean, there's algae, there's bacteria, there's fungus, there's insects, there's earthworms, there's nematodes, there's just so many, and occasionally there's a mold. So they don't do much good in the garden or a yard. So I wouldn't call them a beneficial, but most of these organisms are very beneficial and necessary. And if the soil is sterilized and none of these things exist, plants are not going to grow very well at all. So other things that organic matter does in the soil, again, bacteria and fungi, an abundance of those. The soil respires, actually soils breathe, whether you know that or not. Hosts earthworms, which are good, nematodes. There are good ones, there are bad ones. These are like little bitty roundworms. And the more microbial diversity, the better off we are too, because there's good ones and bad ones, and there's a whole ecosystem going on below the ground that we really need to understand and appreciate. And so a few facts: soil, water, and air have more effect on plant health than plant nutrient levels. You know, many times we think, well, all we need is to put on fertilizer. Buy this bag of fertilizer, put it on, things will grow well. Well, I can tell you, if the grower can manage the soil structure and have good soil health, which means has good pore space, good water retention, good organic matter, and then in conjunction with these fertilizer nutrients, you'll achieve your best results. And the agronomist's job number one is to help the grower create a healthy soil to minimize stress on the plant. Because a stressed plant doesn't grow well, and there's even studies to show that a stressed plant attracts insect pests. They'll pick on the weak one in the herd, and you'll have more disease issues from plants that aren't growing healthy, just like we need to be healthy as humans, and that helps us stay away from other diseases and our immune system's best. So soil with a good structure, abundant microbial life, and good water infiltration rate needs less nutrients, i.e. fertilizer, because the plant is more efficient at extracting them from the soil. And where that comes into play as an agronomist, if we can help create a healthy soil, we can cut down on fertilizer applications, because fertilizer is not only an expense, but an excess fertilizer program can cause water pollution, because the excess, if it's not taken up to the plant, is then free to wash off or leach down to groundwater. So a basic recipe for a good soil: 5 to 10% organic matter, which is compost, humus, animal manures, peat; 10 to 20% sand, 10 to 20% silt, 50 to 70% clay. Yeah, that's a good ideal recipe, but unfortunately, in a real field, Mother Nature doesn't provide us soil from like a Miracle Grow bag. You know, if you're into a greenhouse or plant growing of your own in the house or in the garden, you might buy some Miracle Grow, which supposedly has lots of the nutrients and everything you need in it, including the fertilizer. But when we get out in a real field, like most people's gardens, it's not, we have whatever Mother Nature's dealt with us. And different soils have different composition. And many of you who know anything about soil, I mean, basically, you know that there's different colored soils. There are darker soils, there are lighter soils. And if you look at these, there's three different soil types out of the same field. We have some that's got a kind of a medium brown color that's got a fair amount of clay in it. We've got this darker, blacker soil, which typically, if it's blacker soil, means it has more organic matter. And then you can see this other area, at least I can see that it's got more sand in it. So a pure sand is not a good soil, a pure clay is not a good soil, but you need some of each of those things. for a good growing soil. So changing the structure of soil is a long-term process and a goal. So if you've got a large garden or a 50-acre field or a 1,000-acre field, I mean, I've had the privilege of working for people that had 1 acre of crop, vegetable gardening, or 15,000 acres. We all have the same goal, is to change the soil structure, but that's a long-term process of management. There's only so many things we can do on a large scale. But in the short term, we can control nutrient applications, which also known as plant food. So an agronomist uses what's called the 4R approach for nutrient management. That's the official nationwide program. Now, what I've done over time is I've added the Minky edition, which I'm going to call the 5th R. And I'll explain that as we talk about the 4 R's. So the 4R is supposed to meet the goals of good economics, good environmental stewardship, and social goals as well, doing the right things so that we minimize the impact on our non-farming neighbors. And that is broken down into 4 things, and that is the right fertilizer source applied at the right time, at the right rate, at the right time, in the right place. And, when you think about it, it all makes sense, but what they've done is broken it down into the scientific principle and the right source, make sure there's a balanced supply of each of the essential nutrients in a form the plants can use it, and take credit for the manures and composts and other nutrient credits. So right source of nutrients, the right rate, assess what's in the soil already, and then apply the plant food according to its demand. I mean, you get a bag of fertilizer and it says, all right, you have this much nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium in it, and then we have to know, okay, how much do we put on? How much nitrogen do we need? How much potassium do we need? And so some of the best practices to figure that out are soil testing, which we're going to talk about in a bit. How much of these nutrients does the crop take out of the ground every year? We have to replenish that. What does the crop yield? The more you take off the field from a yield, the more nutrients go out with that grain or forage or whatever it is you're growing. And then we have to look at the prices. If the crop price isn't very good and the price of fertilizer is high, do we dare apply something very expensive? We might get more yield, but at the same time, we may lose more money. So the agronomist has to know a little about farm economics as well. Putting on nutrients at the right time. Could we put on fertilizer for our garden right now if we're not going to plant for another month? What about last fall? Is that a good time? When is the crop going to need those nutrients? What are those nutrients can the soil actually hold and wait, or what are those things that during a weather event, like we had some heavy rains the other day, might get washed away? So there's different practices of timing. I know, in my own garden, I'll plant potatoes, but I might put on some fertilizer or some compost and poultry manure or something a little later after the crop's up and rake it in to get the nutrients closer to when the tubers are forming. You can do some scouting. Again, tissue sampling is another way of assessing does the plant need something? It looks a little yellow. On a large scale, some people can actually take leaf samples from the plants, have them run in the laboratory and say, oh, hey, you're short on this or that, and then we can apply that fertilizer while the crop's growing. And then there's a large environmental initiative to put cover crops. So if the crop has grown and we've harvested it, and there's nutrients that didn't get utilized, we plant a cover crop, then we capture those nutrients, and then we till that in the next spring. Then they break down into more organic matter, which is a good thing, and releases those nutrients. So that's becoming a very good practice. And putting the nutrients in the right place. Early on, the crop the root system, that seed is a little food package that gets that plant growing until the roots can seek nutrients out on their own. And sometimes the farmer will put a little bit of fertilizer down there close to where the roots are going to grow to get that young plant a good start. And then there's ways of applying fertilizer later. We might inject it in the ground between the rows. Anyhow, the idea is to put the nutrients where the crop can get them. I've seen in a dry year, when you think about here's your soil surface, the plant's here, the roots are here, and you need fertilizer. If you scatter it on top of the ground and it doesn't rain, the roots are not growing up near the surface. They're where the moisture is. So the fertilizer needs to get down there where the roots are growing. Just those type of considerations. One of the most important things is what's good for agriculture's bottom line is good for the environment. So if we can be efficient as an agronomist, recommending no more fertilizer than what's needed, but enough to grow a good crop to make profits so we can come back and farm again next year, we don't leave anything excess for the environment to have to deal with if the crop's not taking it up. So that's all good stewardship all the way around. So what's the fifth R? That's the thing that I think where the agronomist comes in as well. And it's having the right data. It's good data is extremely important. I mean, we look at research, yield plots, soil information like soil testing, extension folks. I'm sure, Mary, you seem to be in the advice-giving business as well. You probably rely on data. And some of it's personal data. What have you experienced in certain situations? So, but that data, that fifth R, is required for the decisions that impact all the other R's, which is the answer to the question, how do you know what is right? So all those right things, we have to have the data to know that it's right. And so many times I've seen in my career that blanket approaches are a part of the problem. In that, a farmer says, well, I know I need fertilizer, so I'll go to somebody that sells fertilizer and they say, hey, all you need is this, just put it on, no problem. No testing, no data, I think we used to call it the by guess and by gosh method. Well, it looks like it could use that. Let's put it on there and see if it works. And if it does, you say, oh, by gosh, it did. Or if it didn't, you say, by gosh, it didn't. So we can do much better than that these days with all the testing and resources we have available to us. So the agronomist has to take all that data and relate it to crop growth based within the confines of profitability. So if we look at soil structure, soil health, and we balance the nutrients, then we're really dealing with the operating of the system of the soil in the proper manner. Now, talk about soil sampling. I think that's available to everyone, even in the smallest garden. When you do take a sample, it needs to be representative to get the best data. Soil type is a zone where you have different fields as a zone, and you take multiple probings, or you can even do it with a spade or something like that, composite together to represent the area. In a simple example, so say this is your home, and you really want to pinpoint nutrient need. Well, your garden's an area, the front yard, the backyard are separate areas. You might have another area of trees and shrubs or the flower bed. All these things, as a history, you have dealt with separately over time. Put fertilizer on the garden, but I never fertilized around the tree and shrubs. Maybe I want to. So you don't want to mix these samples together. There's potentially 5 different samples taken on this one small property. And so when you send this sample to a laboratory, you'll get a whole string of numbers on a sheet. Now, some of them do a little different, I'll show you. But the example of soil test on the left, here are all the things that these 2 samples have analyzed. Some of them you recognize, pH, organic matter, phosphorus, maybe some you don't recognize: calcium, magnesium, sodium, copper, manganese, iron. And you might say, well, that's a lot of stuff. What do I do with it? But maybe the biggest question is, well, which element's the most important? Because most people in agriculture or even garden stores talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That's the big three. Well, they're the big three because plants use the most of those. But the answer to this question is all of those elements are important. Any one of these, even in deficient amount or excess, can limit crop yield. And each should be in a proportionate balance with each other. So that's what's really important about a soil test. Another thing on a soil test is that they have something called a TEC, or total exchange capacity. This is the capacity of a soil to hold different nutrients that have a positive charge. Calcium, potassium, ammonia, sodium. A low CAC soil, like this one is 5, versus a 25, has less places to hold these nutrients. So we also look at this CEC, or this cation exchange capacity, to know how to properly fertilize a field. So, and then there's nitrogen. It's a very complex and difficult thing to test for. And nitrogen is controlled by soil microbes. Again, healthy soil, healthy nutrients supplied to the plants. And I call them the gatekeepers, which is true of a lot of other nutrients as well. There's so many different things of nitrogen. And nitrogen, I don't know if many of you over the years have heard about nitrate pollution, which can be toxic to humans. It gets in the water. That's why we try and be very efficient with nitrogen to grow things, because we have an excess. This nitrate can actually go down to groundwater, could affect wells or rivers with maybe the water's drawn from a municipality. So bottom line is, a soil test is only as good as its interpretation. Now here's another type of soil test that shows you things on a graphic level, which will give you a good idea of where your soil stands. But that job of interpretation is one of the primary jobs of the agronomist, to take these numbers and tell you, based on your goals, your soil, this data, what you need to apply. So I'm going to kind of summarize the things here. The agronomist's mission is to know the grower's goals. What are you after? Is it organic gardening? Is it high yield? Is it pretty flowers? Or, what is the goal? What is the grower's resources? What do you have available? Do you have animal manure available for your garden or for your farm? That's great. I work with some farms that buy poultry manure and put it on thousands of acres. It's a great organic source of nutrients, and it's very economical. Our mission is to gather the pertinent data and interpret the data into workable recommendations to help the farmer or the grower achieve their goal. Follow up with an assessment during the growing season. How's it going? How's things look? Oh, we got a problem here in this area. Maybe we'll get another sample. And maybe compare the good area with the bad area. We can only do that during the growing season, when we can monitor things. Troubleshoot problems during the growing season, gather new data. Assess the results at the end of the year. How did it go? What should we do different? Make adjustments and plan for next year. So that's all part of the agronomist's mission. And again, it's been a rewarding career for me to work with people I love to work with, to be involved with growing things and help them become more profitable, or at least gratified with the job that they do. So with that, I'll leave you with a thank you and a picture of a farm that's not too far from us. It looks like a Maxfield Parish painting. I love the colors. People accuse me of doctoring this, but that's the real thing. And then I'll leave you, this is just a little couple photos from our place. My grandfather named the place Shady Brook Gardens years ago when he was in the tree nursery business. And so we've tried to carry on that tradition and have a lot of wild areas as well. So the blue flowers in the bottom, those are flowers that my grandmother planted about 100 years ago that have just grown wild, and that's what they look like right now. And
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. I love these pictures of your spot. What kind
you
of
have to come
flower?
visit.
What is that blue one?
It's called Glory of the Snow.
Okay. Wow. It is just like a carpet. That's amazing.
The honeybees love it.
I bet. Comes out early, it looks like. So, is it blooming now?
Yes, right
Nice.
now. It just started this past week.
Oh, fun. I am so glad that you talked a lot about soils. I am definitely a compost nerd, and I love playing in soil and looking at all the different colors and different types. So that was really interesting. You said a word that I don't know, and that is friable. And so for me, I'm like, you're talking about soil or you're talking about French fries. I don't know. So help me out with that one. What does that mean?
Friable, Friable. You're a soil or a compost person. When you take that, and if it doesn't clump together, like you take a ball of soil, and if you squeeze it and it stays into a ball and doesn't crumble apart, that's non-friable. Friable is that however you do it, it falls apart, has that nice texture. That's a friable, that's a goal to have a nice friable soil.
Whoa, neat.
So put that in your vocabulary.
Thank you. I'll keep it. And also you said that soils respire. So what are they?
Respiration, yes.
What are they expelling, I guess? I think about what we're adding to soils, but I guess I'm not really thinking about their exhale or yeah.
Well, a root system, for example, part of the plant, it exchanges soil gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Now, we know the top part in the daytime takes in carbon dioxide and makes oxygen, but at night it expires carbon dioxide because it needs sunlight to combine with the oxygen to make the sugars and things like that. But the roots are respiring. All those organisms that live below ground, whether it's the bacteria or the earthworms, they're all living and breathing. And if you get rid of the oxygen in the soil, you'll kill those things. Or if you limit the oxygen, there'll be organisms that will grow that are more undesirable type of organisms. So the soil is constantly respiring, whether it's carbon dioxide, oxygen, even nitrogen gases. If the soil is waterlogged for a period of time, that nitrogen that we want the plants to use will actually be used by different types of organisms and make nitrogen gas, N2, which will respire the nitrogen gas to the atmosphere, which the atmosphere is 78% nitrogen or N2 gas and 20% oxygen and 2% carbon dioxide as a rule of thumb. So there's all that going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's just a really cool, wonderful ecosystem that to most people is just dirt. But you need to look down below what's going on, because if what's going on down below is not right, what's going on up above is not going to go well.
I agree. And it was funny because I think during the pandemic, we all had our own something that we kind of clung to. I ordered lots of seeds. That seemed to have been my thing. But I also was considering like keeping soil, like going out and kind of putting soil away, because I was like, well, if something happens, I'm gonna need soil. The seeds won't work. So that was my kind of first thing was, am I going to start to be a prepper and stockpile soil? I didn't go that far.
Survivalist, yeah.
I didn't go that far. You mentioned tissue sampling, and we mentioned in our part 1 that there was a machine someone was using. They put, it almost just looked like a scanner, and they would put leaves on it and have that run through. But I think that was for leaf area. So can you describe to me what a tissue sample would look like?
And there are scanners that some people have perfected that can scan at least for nitrogen content. If any of you're used to growing plants and in using nitrogen as a fertilizer, it makes things green. And so sometimes they develop this thing that can figure out the proportion of nitrogen and whether it's deficient or not. But a regular tissue sample is if you sample at certain stages of growth in plants, and take this to a laboratory, they'll analyze it for many of the same things that we looked at in the soil test. But then they'll have it as a percentage, and then based upon the stage of the plant growth and those percentages, then you can determine then what might be deficient. And the soil test may look perfect, but the tissue sample may show some issues, and that can be a problem of root uptake, or maybe some other interference is going on. So it's a diagnostic tool. You don't take a tissue sample and decide that's how I'm going to fertilize. It's just what's going on here. Am I meeting my good goals in the soil, or is there something else I need to tweak? Something else going on in that plant that the tissue sample will give us information on.
Oh, okay. So the tissue sample and the soil samples you are sending to a lab. You're not doing testing in the field with those.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So I can definitely see why you are in the Hall of Fame for Ohio agriculture. It was well earned. You have taught us so much today. That 5th R, I really appreciate that, because I have been teaching students and people about the 4 R's, but it was missing something. Yes, because it's very easy to go in and ask a question about your fertilizer needs and someone to just sight unseen be like, oh, well, this is what you need. And you could still be satisfying several of those R's, but without the data, you're shooting in the dark. So I hope we add a 5th R to that little graphic moving forward. I definitely will.
Good. Keep it going.
Thank you so much, Tom. I am really, really grateful for you sharing this time with us today and your expertise and all you've contributed to us. I hope that we're able to keep in contact, and maybe I'll come up and visit.
Please do. Please, anytime.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this special guest session of the Botany Bistro. I realized I was so excited to talk to Tom that I forgot to tell you about my lunch, which smells so good. So as he was talking, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I am so excited to eat my lamb curry. And this was actually a gift from a friend. So thank you so much to Dave and Jen, who love to come and visit us and bring all these wonderful goodies. We've got potatoes, we've got carrots. It's just nice and fresh. It's been a little rainy and cold here in Cincinnati, really getting into spring. And so I hope that you all had a wonderful lunch today. And our homework is the same as last time. Tell us about your favorite crop. We're thinking about soil. We're thinking about how we can be sustainable. And it was really refreshing to hear from Mr. Menke today about his experiences and how important it is to consider what's happening below the surface of the soil and to respect that ecosystem and learn more and more about it as much as we can so that we are making the right decisions and including all those 5 R's when we are considering agriculture. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.